YouTube friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be all about the proper form with your exercises. Are you doing the proper form with the exercises? If you guys want to go a little bit more in depth and learn about proper form on exercises, stay a while and watch the video. All right guys, so I did a question box on Instagram last week asking you guys what exercises you wanted to see proper form done on. And there was a lot of answers. Was squats, deadlifts, the different variations of deadlifts and hip thrusts. And then there was a mixture of other things in there. So I'm only gonna be able to fit so many exercises in this video. So I picked the ones that were requested the most. The squats, the Bulgarian split squat, the different variations of deadlifts, lunge variations, hip thrusts, a single leg hip thrust, glute bridge, push-ups, and then I will be going into back, shoulders, triceps, and biceps, and just kind of doing a quick rundown of the technique and form when doing any of those exercises. All right, let's just jump right into the video. So the first thing that we need to recognize is that the lack of mobility. Main areas that you really need to have mobility and flexibility in, and that would be your ankles, our shoulders, our wrists, and also your hips. You can get down the proper movement and practice it enough times and work on mobility and work on stretching, work on your flexibility, you'll be able to get more depth in your squat. Squats, it's very common. A lot of people, when they're squatting down, they're buckling in, their knees come in. You do not want your knees to buckle in, cave in. Say, no matter what stance you are, everybody has a preference for a different stance. No one stance is right or wrong. It depends on your flexibility and mobility when you're squatting. People who lack that, wider stance is more comfortable. When you're squatting, thinking of knees following your toes. So, you know, you're gonna have you're not gonna be straightforward like this with your feet. You're gonna have a slight angle to them outwards. When you're squatting down, you want your knees to follow your toes. So when you're squatting down. So you can see how when I'm coming down, it's coming like this. I'm not doing this, okay? No rounding of the back and no hyperextending the back. So like pushing your butt up. You want to think supine. Supine means straight line in your back, in connection with your hips. Head and chest come up, but you're not cranking your head back. It's staying straight up, head, chest up. So as you're coming down, you're pushing back into your hips. Hips go back, but you're thinking going back and down like as if you were sitting in a chair. So when you're sitting in a chair, you're not gonna go like this and sit into a chair. You're gonna sit down. You're just gonna go straight back and sit into a chair. You can use a chair as a guide when you're squatting. That is a great way to start when you're doing squats, and great way to start when you have weight. I personally, when I'm working on trying to improve my squat, I like having something behind me that I can sit back into that helps guide me in going into the right direction. That's why warm-ups and working on your mobility, working on your flexibility is so important for any of your exercises, for anything that you do in the gym or at home. There's quite a few variations of deadlifts, but we're going to be focusing on two today. Stiff-legged deadlift or straight-leg deadlift, and the RDL, the Romanian deadlift. So this was one that was asked a lot in the IG stories. Stiff-legged deadlift, you're going to be in like a fairly narrow stance, about hip width apart. The deadlifts require all hingement at the hips. Also, your back. You're not rounding, you're not hyperextending your back. It's supine, and it stays in a straight line the whole time as you're hinging at the hips. Head and chest stay up, so remember that. We're not looking down and we're not looking way up. So you're not like this, or you're not like this. You want to think of following and sliding down the front of your thighs, your shins down to your toes, and back up. You're gonna hold hip width apart, just on the outside of your hips, just here. Now with the stiff-legged, reaching to your toes. So it looks like this, coming up. So you can see there's not a whole lot of movement, but but I'm stretching out the back of my hamstrings, my legs. Now when you go to the RDL, the difference is you're pushing further back into your hips, a little bit more movement in your knees. So you're coming down, up, down, up. Okay. There is not one lunge. There are different positioning for lunges and they will target a different area of your leg. Lunge, some people have to be further out, some people can be further in when doing this lunge. Now this depends on the flexibility in this quad muscle here and also in your abductors, so hip joints here, and the ligaments. And you don't want this knee to be buckling in. It should be just slightly, not a lot, but a little bit out at an angle, so it shouldn't be in. Should be here. A wider lunge and sitting tall is going to be more back, glutes, and hamstring dominant. Being a little bit more narrow in and leaning forward a little bit more is going to be more quad dominant. So it's we either have stationary or we have you're just reversing into a lunge, or you could be lunging forward. Thrust. You'd be using my trusty little ice chest here for this exercise. So before I use the weight, I'm going to show you the proper movement for the hip thrust. Keyword, thrust. It's all focusing on our pelvis. Tucking your chin into your chest, it protects your spine when doing this movement. And it helps keep your back supine. So you're not rounding, so you're not drooping, or you're not overextending. So for this, tilt. You want to think taking your pelvis and thrusting it, tilt up, bringing your belly button towards your spine. At a little bit of wider stance, and you're not out here, you're not way in here, okay? You want your thighs to be parallel with the floor. Your spine and your head, everything stays in one line together as you do the movement. Now the first thing I see people go wrong when they're lifting is when they have the bar here, they're going like this to try to lift the weight up. Don't do that. Don't use your neck and your back to try to lift this up. Your upper back is going to be on the bench. Make sure the bench doesn't slide. And make sure your feet are planted where they need to go. And you're going to push through your glutes to bring that bar up. This is going to be all back. All back. Thrust up, down, thrust up, down, thrust up. Single leg, there's different variations to doing a single leg. B stance, which is one leg is out like this, or you're holding it up here. Okay, so this is going to be more difficult. This is going to be a little bit easier, so you get it's like an 80-20. 80% of the work is going on this leg. Same thing applies for this. Hips stay square. You're not tilting in any weird way. Hips stay square. Same thing applies. Coming down, thrusting up. Coming down, thrusting up. Down, everything in line. Pelvis tilt up. Back is supine, parallel to the floor. Coming down, up, down, up. You are doing the hip thrust on a bench. All of your glute muscles are being activated for that movement. The glute bridge. So we're on the floor for this one. Whoops. Your back is supported, or your spine is supported by the floor. Thighs about shoulder width apart. You're not way out here. You're in a comfortable position where your heels are up, almost up against your butt. And you're coming up, same thing. Tilting. See how my pelvis, I'm tilting, my back straightens out, I get into one line, and my belly button goes to my spine. Here is going to be glutes and hamstrings. Coming down, coming up. Down, up. There's less extension through this movement versus if you were on the bench, because you have more room to move. This is just a shorter movement. So usually when you use a bar, you're gonna have plates on there. you're not gonna have much room to do this movement unless you do the bar by itself. Or you could do a pre-weighted bar which has smaller weights on it that you can do this movement, or you're using dumbbells. This is what it would look like. You're in here, coming down. Going into push-up. So there's a tricep push-up and then there's a regular push-up. That is all about hand placement. Regular push-up is out wider here, where tricep push-up's going to be in close to your body, where elbows slide up against your body. Or a regular push-up is coming out at a slight 90-degree angle when you're pushing out. So it looks like this. So tricep or regular push-up. Push-ups are one of the hardest movements, especially to get correctly, because if you lack any strength in your chest or your shoulders, you also weaken your core. That's going to interfere when it comes to the push-up. So I highly recommend those of you who are beginning with a push-up to start with a beginner push-up before trying to do the actual real push-up, because otherwise you might develop bad habits, you might hurt yourself. The push-up is all about bending at the elbows, keeping a tight core so there is no dipping and arching, and there's no sticking your butt up in the air. So the beginner push-up here would be off of your knees. There's none of this, okay? So see how I straighten out, everything's straightened out. So this is that pelvis tilt that I'm talking about, and bringing that belly button to the spine. You're making a straight line with your upper body. When you're coming down, you're bending at the elbows, chest goes straight to the floor. Now when you're pushing back up, pushing through those hands and those fingers, pushing through that chest, keeping that core tight, straightening those elbows out. So see how this movement looks? Same thing, you're not up here, and you're not sticking your butt up in the air and trying to do this push-up, just like this. Not doing this, okay? Or you're not doing this. I see this a lot. You're coming forward on your toes, tight core, and you're coming down, elbows bend, coming back up. See, everything moves together. So whenever you're doing a back exercise, you're not rounding your back, okay? You're not like this, trying to pull the weight. We're going back to that straight line in your back. You're coming down, straight line, head and neck, everything is in line with each other. And when you're pulling this weight, you're bending at your elbow, but you're pulling through this back muscle. And you're pulling just like this. So it's not like this, okay? It's pulling. You're going straight up and down, pulling through, and you end up in line with your body, coming down, squeezing. You want to think of squeezing these back muscles inward. So you can see the difference. What happens is I am engaging my core, my back is in a line with my head and my back, and I'm using my back muscles and I'm pulling through my back. So I end up thinking, comes back to that. Think of your back muscles, you're squeezing them and pulling them inward. So these are focusing on pulling exercises. When you're doing anything bicep related, it's all about the extension and control of the movement. I always say, think of keeping your elbow tight to your side, and the only thing that should be moving is your forearm. So when you're coming down, you're getting that full extension. And then when you're coming up and curling towards your chest. So this isolates, and you'll be working your bicep muscle. I see a lot of people swinging. That's not right, because you're taking away from isolating that bicep muscle. You're just doing like a full body thrusting motion, I don't know. Now you can do different ways. You can start here and curl up, or you can stay here and curl up. It's really up to you. There's many varieties of doing a curl. But you're here, it's all about the full extension, coming all the way down, coming up, squeeze, control, 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 coming down. Squeeze, control, control, coming down. Just like this. Show this variation up and down. So you can see how my elbow, I'm not bringing it way out here. Same rule applies when you're doing a tricep exercise. It's that forearm that's moving. The upper part of the arm is controlled and stabilized. So we are going to do a bent over tricep kickback as an example. So again, elbows stay tight to the side and you're extending out till that arm straightens out, just like this. So this is going to target and isolate the back of your arm, the tricep muscle. So you're thinking of hammering to the ceiling behind you. Again, there's so many different variations for doing your shoulders. We're going to focus just on side and a front raise. And when you're doing a shoulder exercise, a lot of people come up like this. Now, unless you're doing there's a couple exercises that require you to come up over your head, but if you're just doing like a side raise, which comes up out to the side raise, hence the name, or front raise, hence the name, you're not going to be coming like this and like flying, okay? Coming parallel and coming back down. Parallel to the floor and coming back down. Same thing, parallel and coming back down. This way it's going to actually target and isolate that muscle. So all of these form adjustments, these techniques, these little details apply to anything that you're doing. If it's a cable, it's a bar, it's a dumbbell, or bands. And it's all about control and isolating out the muscle that you are working. There's so many different variations of exercises. We're just going over some basic ones, and if you can learn the basics and learn that foundation of that exercise, the foundation for that exercise, you're going to be able to execute and do any variation properly and actually target the muscle that you're working and avoid injuries. And you'll be able to progress as well. There was request for core, but you guys, the key is when you are doing proper form in all of these exercises, you are engaging your core. Now, it's not direct isolated ab exercises, but you are, when you're doing it correctly, you're engaging your core and you're training your core muscles, you're strengthening your core muscles. The same thing as your back. Deadlifts with your squats, and you're engaging that core, you're doing the proper movements in all of these exercises, you are going to strengthen your core muscles and they're going to get stronger. Now you can throw core exercises in there, and I actually have videos on beginner strengthening core exercises, so I will tag that for you guys. But as you guys have seen through this whole video, you're almost applying the same kind of form to almost every single exercise. Those movements, maybe just with body weight or really, really lightweight until you start working on heavier weight. Just don't sacrifice form for weight. So I encourage you guys to either you can film yourself or watch yourself, or if you have somebody with you, help make sure you're executing that exercise with proper form. Hopefully you found this video educational and you're able to find a little bit more insights and a little bit more clarity on form for certain exercises. And it's just about practice and consistency, and the more you practice the correct way to do it, eventually it's going to become second nature. You're not going to even think about it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching this video today, and I will see you guys on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Mwah!